I got to tell you, pre-COVID, I traveled a lot. And so I would walk through the Dallas Love Field Airport and think, oh my goodness, we ought to be in here. Like we truly ought to be here and in here. And you know how I am, Tex, kind of like world domination, takeover spirit. I'm like, we got to do a takeover of this airport. And of course, when I start to envision a complete takeover, having the Mavs out there, a whole new look, of course, you know who I thought about. There's one person who I know can carry out that vision for us, and that's of course you, Tex. So it was. Thank you for like really leading and carrying out that vision. Why did you think it was a good fit for us?
I just think, it was an interesting time, obviously, with COVID hitting. And I just think it was something that we could do to obviously speak to the team spirit, but just also to uplift everybody, and their coming and goings. And it gave us an opportunity with the airport being down traffic-wise for a while, that when everybody got a chance to start to come back to travel, they got something that was warm and inviting and spoke to them from this city.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Love Field Stories. I'm Chris Perry, the External Communications and Marketing Manager at Dallas Love Field.
And I'm Bill Hancock, Executive Director of the College Football Playoff. On Love Field Stories, we share stories, memories, and experiences about our favorite airport and its effect on the people of North Texas.
And today I am lucky and thrilled to be here with one of my favorite people in the world as we talk about one of our favorite subjects, which is college football and other sporting events and the impact of sports here on Dallas Love Field and the North Texas region. So how are you today? And I should probably preface this by saying, how are you today, Uncle Bill?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. It's really a thrill, and thanks for joining us, of course, and helping us out here, and we're really happy to have you. And so we'll just get right into it. So I guess we should, start at kind of our history together, our history in sports, the back and forth in the family between, I like to tell people you're the best Sooner I know because I am a proud Oklahoma State Cowboy. And, our story goes back quite a ways, as we were talking beforehand. There's us I believe we're probably in Stillwater there at Christmas, and then obviously that was more recently. You see there that Bill's wearing an orange shirt for that one because when it comes to Oklahoma State athletics, we agree on one sport, and which one is that?
That would be women's soccer.
That's right. Bill and Nikki and do not miss many Oklahoma State women's soccer games. Are my cousin and Bill's, I guess that would be daughter-in-law, Karen, actually started the program at Oklahoma State in what year? 1990.
Oh my goodness, 95? I lose track.
Yeah, that sounds about right. The first head coach of Oklahoma State women's soccer, and now is an assistant coach and holds a role in the athletic department there at Oklahoma State. So, there's always been a lot of sports around the family. It's always been really important to the family. Going back almost as we were talking about ahead of time, I was born on March 30th, 1988. And what were you doing in late March 1988 and early April 1988?
Oh, man, I had a life-changing event. The Final Four was in Kansas City. I worked for the Big 8 Conference, and I was asked to be the co-chair of the local organizing committee. And we started working on that Final Four about 1985 or 86. And that weekend was the culmination of all of our work, and something else really cool happened that weekend.
That's right. Yeah. And as we were saying, the joke's always been that, they had to induce labor on my mother so that my dad could get to the Final Four up in Kansas City from Tulsa, so from the Tulsa area. So, and then, we'll talk about, your history a little bit. Obviously you mentioned there in the late 80s, you were working for the Big 8, and, you said it was a life-changing event. How was it kind of a springboard into your career and the role you have now with the college football playoff?
Yeah, for me, the 88 Final Four was when I really got to know the staff at the NCAA. And a year and a half later, they were looking for someone to become the director of the Final Four, men's Final Four. And they called me, and I said, I'd love to talk to you about this, and got the job. And that was the beginning of a great 16-year period that I had at the NCAA. And because of that, I got to know the people who managed the BCS at the time. They called me and said, we're looking for somebody to run this full time. And would you do it? And I said, man, absolutely. Sign me up. I've always loved college football, and getting to put my 16 years of experience with the tournament together with football has really helped me a lot. And this is my 17th season in college football. So how lucky am I? I got to direct the best event in college basketball, and now I get to direct the best event in college football. My goodness.
Not many can say that. Well, I guess technically no one can say that, except for you. So, as you mentioned college football, I know a lot about the history behind, the BCS transitioning over to the college football playoff, kind of, the way that it changed the sport and really changed the landscape of all sports. But when you guys were, when that decision was made and you realized, we're actually going to have this college football playoff, we're going to find a full-time staff and set them up. What made you all decide, this is the place where we want to do, we want to have our headquarters here in North Texas?
Well, I was the only employee of the BCS and operated out of my home in Kansas City, but we knew we needed to have a headquarters, and we did choose Dallas, obviously, where our office is in Irving. And a big part of that was the air service. To be able to be right here in the middle of the two airports, and what was an awesome thing for us is we don't have many visitors, but we travel a lot. And the airports here are just perfect for us. And as I said in the open, it is true. Love Field is my favorite airport. So I call it my home base. I do fly out of DFW when I have to, but Love Field is my home base.
And, most people don't know you actually don't live in Dallas full time. So you do spend a lot of time at Love Field, or have over the last, 5, 6, 7 years. Yep.
I travel a lot for business, and then also commute back to Kansas City on weekends where I live.
So you mentioned Kansas City, so we could kind of get into that a little bit. The first Super Bowl, the Dallas Texans, who then became the Kansas City Chiefs, owned by the Hunt family, well-known family here in Dallas, Lamar Hunt met with Tex Schramm, who at the time was the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, as the Kansas City Chiefs were in the AFL, the American Football League, and the Cowboys were obviously in the NFL. And the two leagues, tired of trying to outflank each other, decided that they would come together and create one big football league, which became the NFL and led to the Super Bowl and led to Monday Night Football and all the iconic different brands that are around the NFL now. And that actually happened right here at Love Field. Tex Schramm and Lamar Hunt met in the terminal, and then out of fear that they may get caught by some media cameras or something like that, decided to go out to the airport parking garages. So there's history all over the place around here. And then you actually have some history, with the Chiefs as well, with Hank Stram, I think was your neighbor at one point. Is that correct?
Yeah, Hank Stram, before we moved into our house, he lived across the street from us. So his boys were raised in our neighborhood, and I never got to talk to Hank about it. I always regretted that. And thinking back to the story about the Super Bowl, I'm obviously one of many who remembers the old terminal at Love Field, and was lucky enough to be able to watch the construction of the new terminal and how they integrated that so seamlessly. And we were all of us passengers were so curious about this wonderful new terminal that was coming. And and I remember I was there a week or so after we moved into the new terminal, and what a remarkable experience that was. I love the old terminal. I love the history of it, but my goodness, this new terminal it's my favorite because it's so convenient, so warm, so welcoming. I actually played the piano back in the day when the piano was there.
That's right. Yeah, we had the little pop-up art exhibit with the piano.
Yep. So I love Love Field. What can I say?
And then, yeah, you mentioned the old terminal. You're one of the one of the ones who traveled a lot, even in the pre-Wright Amendment days. But Kansas City there happened to be on the list of places you could go without having to stop. So, you've certainly got the full Love Field experience over the last, I guess we'll call it a decade, something like that, and the way the airport's really changed. And we actually just had a really busy day, and you were involved in that as well, or involved in that you were there. Each year around the State Fair of Texas, as any of the college football fans tuning in today know, or just Dallas residents know, that the Longhorns from Texas come up from Austin, and the Sooners from Oklahoma come down from Norman and meet there at the State Fair of Texas every year. And what's been your experience with the Red River rivalry and just all that it's meant to the city of Dallas, and then to those two universities, and then to college football and college sports as a whole?
I got two words for you: corny dog. No, it's a great rivalry. I've been to all the other great rivalries. I've been to Army Navy. I've been to Georgia, Florida. Been to Ohio State, Michigan, and OU Texas, or as we say here in Dallas, Texas OU. Tops them all. I think in large part because of the tradition of the schools, but obviously the fair. And I love the fair. I don't get to go to the game every year, although I'd like to, and my wife would really like to. But we were able to go this year, and our ritual is we get there in dark and get a parking spot and go immediately to, can I say Fletcher's on this
I think so,
podcast?
Yeah. Sure.
We immediately go to the nearest Fletcher stand and have a corny dog for breakfast. And then we have another one after the game. So we just love the whole atmosphere. And when you list the big rivalries in college football, you have to list OU Texas. That's all there is to it. It's a fantastic event, great for the community. I went to my first OU Texas game in 1967. I have a friend named Jim Weber who has been to 54 consecutive. But I read a story, that's not the record. I believe I read about a guy who had been to 70-some consecutive OU Texas games.
And how many did your brother make it to?
My brother made it to 56, I believe.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. I moved down to this area in 2010, and then moved over. I lived over in Fort Worth for a few years, and then once I moved to Dallas in 2014, living here since then, it's always amazed me the way that the city has embraced the event, and the fabulous way that they've kept the game there at the Cotton Bowl for as long as they can. I like both of our stadiums. I don't, obviously, there's not many events out there anymore, but the ones that I've gone to at the Cotton Bowl, I think it's still a fabulous setting, and especially that scene on the second Saturday in October is always, even as someone who's not a fan of either program or doesn't have a rooting interest, it's always been appointment television for me, and seeing the way that the city just embraces it. And it was and then an eye-opening thing for us this year at Love Field was that it was the busiest day we've had post-pandemic was October 10th, 2021. I probably shouldn't say post-pandemic. Let's not make that was not an official Love Field stance that the pandemic is over, but because we do still have quite a few guidelines that we require you to follow when you come out here, including wearing a mask and throughout your experience and on the airplane and all that stuff. But since March of 2019, when we started to see the downturn in travel, October 10th, 2021, the day after Texas OU or OU Texas, depending on your flavor, that's the busiest day we've had out at the airport since then. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, it just shows how important that weekend is to the city and how much the fans of those schools, and even if they're not going to the game, have really embraced that weekend here in Dallas. So sticking with college football a little bit, obviously you chose Dallas as the headquarters of the college football playoff. I know a number of conferences have done the same thing of choosing this area to host. What was the decision making behind having the inaugural college football playoff championship game in North Texas?
We look for a stadium. We look for a convention center, hotels, air service, and really the ability of the city to host a big event. And Dallas, we checked every box in Dallas, or North Texas, let me say that. The stadium is fantastic. I already talked about the airports. Hotels for the teams are so important for an event like ours. Our North Star is to do things right for the teams. And I'm sure that Ohio State and Oregon had a great experience. Let me give you a little trivia question too, Chris. Who were the two teams that played in the first NCAA men's basketball championship game? Well, I'll answer Ohio State and Oregon. And who were the two teams that played in the first college football playoff championship game? Ohio State and Oregon.
Wow. I guess,
how about that?
I didn't caught on to that one. Yeah, that is incredible. Wow.
Yeah, so that's why we picked Dallas. Obviously, our office was here. We knew it would be easy to work here. The Cotton Bowl staff was the host for this, and they do a terrific job. And so does the stadium staff. Everybody we work with at AT&T Stadium is just first class in every way. And we actually experienced that in a way none of us wanted to last December when the Rose Bowl game had to be relocated here. And
I forgot about that.
Just lined up on very short notice and did a terrific job.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I guess, there's another North Texas trivia question of probably the only Rose Bowl hosted outside of Pasadena was.
Well, actually, second one.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
What was the other?
January 1, 1942.
Okay.
3 weeks after Pearl Harbor. They moved the game away from Pasadena and played in Durham, North Carolina.
That's about as far from Pasadena as you can get, I think. Well, cool. So a little bit, just about, Love Field's always been a huge gateway for sports teams. We've hosted the Mavericks and the Stars keep their planes here, and going back through the archives recently and found some photos of Olympians coming back in here. Yeah, there's one of the Mavs team planes, and you can see that quite a bit. And there's 2011 when the Mavs returned from Miami with the Larry O'Brien Trophy as NBA champions, and Mark Cuban coming off the plane. So Love Field's always had a strong connection to sports, and looking back through the archives, found some photos of Olympians coming back here, and you've got quite a bit of experience with the Olympics as well. What was, we'll shift into kind of pandemic talk a little bit, because that's obviously always been top of mind for everybody for the last year and a half. You did go to the Tokyo in 2021. And you've been to a number of Olympics before. What was that experience like in 2021 compared to the ones you've been to previously, or the 2020 games, excuse me?
Way different with no fans in the stands, but Tokyo was a great host. It's a beautiful city. We got to see a lot of the city, even though the historical sites were shut down. We rode buses all around to go to the venues where we were working, and just really fell in love with the city. It was a lot like college football was last year, and pro football also, with no fans in the stands. But you got used to it. And frankly, for women's gymnastics and men's basketball, there were a fair number of people who were able to see the games. Those were coaches, other student athletes, other athletes. I lapsed into my NCAA speak there for a minute. But coaches, other athletes, staff members who were able to get in on their credentials. So it felt like a enthusiastic crowd. And the biggest thing was that the athletes were able to compete in the Olympics. And there were so many hearts were broken the year before when the games were postponed. And we were just so happy that the games were able to happen in Tokyo. and the athletes got a chance to compete.
Right.
And that was my 14th Olympics, and we're looking forward to going to Beijing to work in February, 4 months from now.
Forgot how quick the Winter Games are going to come up now. And what was the experience with COVID, with travel? You've traveled a lot. You probably didn't for a long time. And, what have you seen as you've traveled to all these various airports and in the way that things have changed during the COVID era?
I'll start with first.
And at the games, yes.
Yeah, for us in Tokyo, we had to produce 2 negative tests within 72 hours of flying over. Obviously, we wore masks all the way on the plane, and then everywhere in Tokyo, we wore masks. So I didn't mind it. I mean, everybody had a mask on. Everybody had a mask on. Yeah, it was comfortable at the end of the day when you got to take them off, but because everybody wore them, it was just kind of second nature. Being back home and traveling again has frankly been kind of fun, kind of comforting. I am delighted to wear my mask when I go into Love Field, and happy to wear it on the plane. It really is good to be back, and it's good to have fans back at college football. I don't think any of us really realized how much we missed that last year. The pageantry, marching bands, cheerleaders, and fans go a long way toward making college football what we know it to be. So we're glad to be back. We're knocking on wood to hope we'll stay back through the rest of the season.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I mean, watching those first few weeks of the season and then going back to the game we talked about earlier back at the State Fair in October, it just, and for those that remember, the 2020 State Red River game was quite an incredible matchup as well, but not as many people were there to see it. And it just felt so different, even just watching it on TV this year, when the Oklahoma running back breaks off that long touchdown run at the end, and he's running right. What I think is the coolest thing in college sports, that they do the 50 to the 50 at the Cotton Bowl instead of doing it end zone to end zone, like almost, I've been to a lot of bowl games, and that's how it generally is there. That he's running into the end zone right in front of all of his own fans was, I mean, it's, as a football fan, I think, when I saw you a few weeks ago, we talked about this, it's almost emotional whenever you get to see that again, and you alluded to it. You don't realize how much you missed it last year, and just things that you take for granted in a year that was, as been said many times, unprecedented.
Yep, absolutely unprecedented. I'll go back to one thing on OU Texas. My wife, Nikki, sat on the 50-yard line. So the person to her right was an OU person, and the person sitting right next to her on the left was a UT person. And in her section, everybody was very respectful of each other. I think they all knew how privileged they were to be there. But somebody has to sit on the 50-yard line all the way up, on both sides, of course, and one of them was Nikki Hancock.
Yeah, someone does. Yeah. And, while she has her allegiances, it's also good to, as you guys like to say in the CFP world, check your hat at the door, right? Is that right? Check
your hat at the door, Nikki. And she wears a lot of brown, a lot of black, a lot of white. We don't wear any school colors. I have to be careful what tie I wear. No school colors allowed at our house in working occasions.
All right. Well, now that I'm checking on what I'm being a bad producer here, I guess we need to move on to the Q&A. So the first question that we've got is, how are we feeling about Bedlam this year? It's always just, for me, one of those things that, one of my friends and I were talking about it. We like to think it's a rivalry. I don't know on the OU side how much it is, just because it's one team has traditionally been a lot better than the other one, but every year is different. And so that's what's exciting about college football, is every week's different, every year is different. That's always what keeps me tuning in.
Yeah, I love rivalries in college football, and this one for us is interesting because Nikki and I both went to OU, but we have strong feelings about OSU in a very good way. So whenever they play, it's kind of tough for us because we have people we know and love on both sides. But it's a great rivalry, a fun rivalry. And really, you kind of measure the rivalry based on what it means in the state, and
right.
Certainly means a lot in that state. But that one has also grown to mean a lot nationally. And How about, Chris, how few people understand where Bedlam originated, that it was not with football?
On the wrestling mats, that's right. Which, at one time was the big sport in the state. So, I mean, it still is a very important sport in the state. The next question, Bill, what goes into planning the college football playoff and the championship game and then obviously the New Year's Six games as well?
We have a staff of 20 here in Irving in our office, and broken down to stadium management, team liaisons, communications, business department, marketing, events, and we work all year for the one game, for the championship game, which this year will be in Indianapolis, our first foray into a northern tier city, and what a better place to go in the north than Indianapolis. They do a great job with events. Primarily, in addition to managing the staff and make sure everybody has the resources they need, both financially and emotionally, taking care of people on the staff, my point responsibilities are primarily with the selection committee, and they'll be putting out their first rankings November 2, first of 5 before selection weekend. Very exciting time for all of us. White knuckle time for the committee, because they understand what those rankings mean to everyone in college football. We like the weekly rankings because it allows the committee to dig in deep every week on what makes up the teams and what they've done during the season, so that by the time we get to selection weekend, they are extremely familiar with every team, including the ones that are going to be in the hunt for the playoff and our final top 25.
So the next question is, Bill, what's next for you in your career? I assume that's the question being asked.
What's next for me is I'm going to go get some yogurt after this. If I could get a Fletcher's Corny Dog somewhere, I'd go get that too. But yep. I've had just a great career, and I'm not as young as I once was, although I still feel young. But I'm just looking forward to the next steps in college football playoff and to helping people come to understand it. Speaking of my career in Dallas, I ran the White Rock Marathon twice back in my marathoning days, including I ran my PR there. The course then was downtown to White Rock Lake and around the lake and back. And I was lucky. Yeah, I was lucky enough to run a 3:06, which is a pretty good time for a non-athlete like me.
Yeah, I mean, when we used to live over in that area, that's something, we would go, because we'd have friends that would either run in the half marathon or the marathon, and it's so cool to watch them come down Turtle Creek and then turn, and
so cool.
Because right there, Turtle Creek comes down that hill right there, and it's just another great sporting event in Dallas, and a great day for the city. Well, there's a tough one. What's your take on NIL and the changing in the way that student athletes are receiving compensation?
Well, the best thing we have going for us in college sports is the word college. And these are college students, and we cannot forget that. And we shouldn't forget it, and I don't think we ever will. But if there's a way to provide more assistance to athletes, then I'm all for it. I do know that the value of the education is something really special. As I talk to my family members and friends whose children are coming out of college with a fair amount of student debt, whereas athletes don't, and that's a great thing. But also understand, as I said, that there are ways to help athletes, and we've come a long way in that. For example, I'll tell you, in CFP, when we started, we asked the NCAA if we could pay the travel expenses for the student athletes' families. And they kind of talked about it and thought about it, and they finally came back and said, yeah, you can do that. And now they're doing it for Final Four also.
Yeah,
just a little thing, a really cool way to help the young people who play the game.
Right. Yeah, and I was thinking about that as you were giving that answer. I mean, I think that's a tremendous thing that you guys have done, and as you mentioned, kind of paved the way for that to happen within the tournament as well. All right, and the final one, as we get into the first rankings of the season, what's excited you so far, and any predictions going forward?
It's been a great season. fun season. Can't wait for more. We're heading into week 9, so there's a lot more football to be played. And I am not in the prediction business. You knew I was going to say that.
Yeah, I had a pretty good pretty good idea as to what was going to go on there. So, all right. Well, I think that is it. Thank you for joining us on Love Field Stories, Bill, and for joining me today. And that was a lot of fun. And I hope that everybody that tuned in really liked it. And, hope enjoyed the conversation, because I know I sure did.
I really did. I also want to tell the audience, Chris Perry is one of the coolest people I have ever met.
Well, thank you, sir. You know that is certainly reciprocated here. So for everyone, don't forget to check out season 1 of Love Field Stories wherever you get your podcasts. Share it with the people you love, and head on over to Apple Podcasts to leave a 5-star rating and support Love Field Airport. So thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Bill, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.